Okay guys, so today we're going to start our Apple project. We're dealing with a couple things here. One of the main elements here is a situation where we use warm and cool colors against each other, complementary colors. And actually that's what we're doing here. There's complements of kind of a red orange and a deep blue here, and they're definitely warm and cools, and they're pretty much complements of each other. So what happens when we use complementary colors is we have a lot of energy between the two colors, and they kind of fight for importance. So it's a way to kind of make a painting look very exciting, and it's also complementary colors. We can use them to dull down colors. If we put, say for instance, we have an orange, it's too red orange, we can throw a little bit of blue into it to kill the chroma or the intensity of the color of the orange, and that the same thing goes the opposite way. So all right, so I took some ultramarine blue and I mixed it up with a little bit of violet. I'm going to leave the background for this one, guys, pretty loose. So we're just going to suggest a background. We're not going to do anything all that definitive. I know there's some folds and stuff in the reference material. I might just indicate them a little bit with light and shadow, but I'm really just going to kind of go for a kind of an abstract background here. So I got a good soupy mixture of my ultramarine blue with a little bit of violet mixed into it. And I'm going to work from the top corner, from over here down to here. And then I'm going to come back up here to about here. Then I'm going to kind of blend them back out. I mean, it's darker up here, it gets a little lighter over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay that in. Again, I'm not going to be too fussy with my background. I'm just going to kind of let this be whatever the paint wants to do here, you know, be what it wants to be here. I'm not going to get, again, too fussy here. I'm just going to lay this paint in. You can see I'm not doing a wet into wet. I'm going to just let the paint cover. Then I'm going to come down and get a little more careful as I go around the outside of the apple. So I went ahead and kind of mixed a bunch of this paint up before I started, which is a little bit of a help because the paint does dry pretty quick. So we want to kind of hurry this along. Again, not doing anything all that specific with the background. So I'm going to keep this, being careful around the edge of the apple again. I keep doing this. I keep erasing my lines so I can barely see them. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to get a little bit lighter as I come on this side. Just a tad lighter. As I start coming over here, I'm going to start letting my paint get a little bit lighter. Again, I kind of mixed that up already, which was helpful. I have the same colors. I added a touch of crimson into it and a little bit of white as well. So now I can start coming down on this side. And again, you see I'm getting little flecks of blue splatter into the apple. I'm going to get them out in a second. You want to try to manage them as quick as you can, guys. You don't want them to get away from you. So again, you can see I'm really not doing anything all that specific on the background. I'm just going to kind of let it blend together and be a little bit on the abstract side. I'm not going to go crazy with it. I'm going to kind of just blend this out a little bit more so it doesn't have marks in it. All right, so now I'm going to come back to this side and do the same thing. I'm going to kind of wash that out a little bit with some water. So again, I'm using ultramarine blue, some violet, and just a touch of white. And pretty good watery mix here. And I'm just adding water to this so it flows a little nicer, and I can kind of finish this off. I'm not doing anything all that specific again, guys. I'm just kind of gradating from dark to light, and washing that out. And now I'm going to kind of do the same thing over here, but the apple is kind of casting a little bit of shadow over here, so I'm going to go back to my darker mix, and I'm going to put that back in. Now we can come back over this with another layer to kind of darken it if we need to, which we probably will need to do. Also, we'll probably throw a little bit of Payne's Gray into that shadow just to darken it up a bit. And the apple's casting a shadow here, so I want to use that. A little bit of dark going on there. I'm just kind of using some water to soften this edge. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just kind of let this kind of bleed out to the bottom. Just taking some clean water and just softening that edge a little bit. Spots I missed a little bit, I can come back in and fix them up a tad. All right. So now what I'm doing, I'm just taking a smaller brush. I'm taking like a number 2. I'm just going to soften the edge of the apple a little bit from that blue. I'm just taking clean water. I'm just going to kind of let the water soften the edge of that blue a little bit. I'm not going to go nuts, just so it's not so cookie cutter. Now on this back side, it's okay if you get a little bit of blue into the shadow area, because it'll get covered over anyway. And so that first part I used my number 10 brush for the background. So now I'm going to mix up some of the colors for my apple. I'm going to start with medium yellow, and I'm going to do a little tiny area of just medium yellow because it's a pretty bright yellow spot right on the area of the apple where on the top where that light area shows through. So I'm going to use some of that. I'm going to start with, remember, we're always going to try to go from light to dark to control our watercolor the best. So right up here I got this nice kind of yellowy orange spot, but in the middle it's pretty good and yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and just let that kind of lay in there, and I'm going to kind of wash it out a little bit, soften the edges of it a little. Now I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that orange mixed in. The medium yellow and the orange mixed together. I'm being a little bit careful because over to the left we have a really nice bright highlight, and I want to kind of leave that nice and light, so I don't want to go over it with anything too dark. So just be kind of careful. I can kind of wash this around a little bit and get this underneath some of the other parts of the apple. It's fine to do that because it'll just kind of show through there anyway in bits and pieces. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that kind of bleed out so I don't get a hard edge. I'm just going to take some clean water, just kind of soften that up a little bit. Over on the top side here, we have that nice highlight. So I just want to make sure that I don't cover over that right now. I'm going to leave that nice and soft. Just let this kind of wash around the edge of it, kind of as an undercolor that we'll see through. Give us a nice warm red orange when we put our reds back in over the top. Now in the middle here we have kind of a green. It shifts to green. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Right in this area we have a little bit of green. So I'm taking my light green, and I'm going to mix that with a little bit of the lemon yellow. Lemon yellow is a little bit of a green yellow. I throw that in there and start with that and see how we make out. I'm just going to pull some of that lemon yellow in. Again, I got a nice highlight right over here. I want to kind of leave that white there. My highlight, I don't want to kind of go over that, so I'm just going to let that stay. And I'm going to let this green kind of just blend right into that orange. Not a bad idea to test it out first. That looks pretty good. So I'll let my red come in here. And I'm going to be a little bit careful as I go around the edge of the apple. I want to keep it nice and clean. Right here is where we have that nice light spot, so I'm going to really be careful about leaving that. So I'm going to grab a little more orange. Let that orange kind of come in over here. And then I'm just going to take a clean brush and use a little bit of a smaller brush here, my number 2, and just kind of let this bleed together. But I want to try to keep that nice light spot. So I'm going to keep working that red in. Again, over here I got that nice highlight, so I'm just going to soften this edge. There's a little tiny highlight running through this thing as well, right here. So you see what I'm doing, guys? I'm going from light to dark. I'm really trying to control my painting this way. So I got that area looking pretty good. This is looking decent. You can always like leave a highlight nice and crisp as well. Sometimes I like to soften them, depending, like if you look at like this edge is a little softer than the bottom edge, so maybe I'll just soften this edge and leave the other one a little more crisp. I'm going to continue my reds down here. I'm going to go back to that brilliant red and just let that kind of finish up as I bring my red around the rest of the apple. So I like to kind of manage my painting in little areas so it doesn't run away from me. I don't have edges drying on me. So I just kind of take my time and do that, and this way I'm able to kind of get the results that I like. So I'm going to let this shadow side just kind of wash in. I'm going to go over this again with a darker value later on, but I'm just going to kind of let that wash in there. And if you look, you'll see that this area here, there's a pretty distinct highlight coming in here. So I'm just going to let that come in. I'm going to soften that just a little bit. And this is that brilliant red over the orange a little bit. Now I'm just going to soften this edge here. Just going to take a clean brush and just water and just soften this edge right here a little bit. I'll let some of that pink come in there, that watered down red. Also, sometimes you can pull a highlight out. Like I got a bit of a highlight up here, so I could pull this out with just a brush. If it's wet enough. Got a little bit going on there. Might work. So now that I got a foundation of dark here, I should be pretty good with getting my my next layer to kind of darken up pretty good. Okay, this time I'm going to start from the top left corner. Just going to do a quick wash right over the top of this. Adding a little more water now. Now I kind of went over that apple by mistake, and I'll just show you guys how to fix that real quick. Now you can see that second layer goes pretty quick, you know, once it's, you got that base down there, it works pretty good, so. Just gonna let it kind of happen. Again, I'm not being too fussy with this background, I'm just gonna kind of lay this in. So remember guys, the watercolor paint will usually dry quite a bit lighter, so keep that in mind when you're painting. I'm just going to throw a little bit of white into the this blue mixture, which is ultramarine blue and some violet, and then I'm going to let that run back down on this front area here. Now where I kind of got a little bit of blue on the red apple, I can just pull that out a little bit if I went too far. I don't think I did too bad of a job. Yeah, a couple spots here. I'm going to take my brush and just kind of work that paint out a little bit. And don't do like I did and just put your hand right down in the painting. That was really stupid. All right, so. Okay, so I've used a hairdryer to dry the background. You can see I got that extra layer of the background starts to get it nice and dark, and we start to get a sense of light and shadow here. And the other good thing we have going on here is we have nice contrast. Contrast is always a big part of having a good design. So we have a kind of lighter to medium valued apple and a darker background, and it makes the apple pop. All right. Plus we have the warm, cool, and the complementary color thing going on as well. All right, so I've mixed up a little bit of orange and some of the brilliant red, and I'm going to start laying in an additional layer on the apple to try to get it to look a little bit more like the apple that we're using as a reference. So as I come over to this side here, I'm going to start laying in that orange. And I'm going to lay the orange in, and then I'm going to lay some red right into it as well. Again, what I'm going to keep doing here, because it's a little tricky, is this this whole area right here. I'm going to keep softening that that edge of the highlight, because it's not a really hard, crisp edge. So I'm just going to take clean water and a smaller brush. While I got that wet, I'm just going to soften that whole thing. I probably could have let that highlight be a little bit bigger. That's okay. So now I got a nice soft edge there. I'm going to continue on with my orange. I'm kind of coming right back around here again. And again, I'm really going to be conscious, guys, of keeping all this kind of kind of loose and let it kind of mix together. I want this to be soft, these beautiful soft transitions on the apple. So that's again why I'm going light to dark. So I'm just going to take a clean brush with some water. Not too much, and just soften these edges because I want to preserve these light areas. I'm just going to let some water run those edges together again. All right, so now I'm going to continue on with that orange, and then I'm going to come right back in with that red while it's wet. Now down here, as I get further into the shadowy areas of the apple, the orange kind of turns to more of a deep red, more of a crimson. So I'm not going to worry too much about that over here. It's softening this edge. So now I'm just going to come in and I'm going to add that red in there. Now I'm using that brilliant red. It's going to kind of plop it right back into that orange. So now I got kind of a wet on wet thing going here, which is good. I mean, we can let these things just blend together, and it's going to really be nice. As I get over to the shadow area, I'm not too worried about what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to be mindful not to let it get away from me, but I'm also aware of the fact that it's quite dark over there, so I don't have to worry too much. I'm more concerned about my lighter areas right now. All right, so I got that side working good. Now I'm going to pull that, I'm just going to blend that orange and that red together a little bit with a little bit of a clean brush. A moist brush, not too wet. So I'm just going to kind of let these two areas blend together with that moist brush. All right, same thing over here. Remember, we got that nice highlight over here, so I got to be careful I don't come too far in on that. I'm going to take my red now. I'm going to keep going with it. Again, this is our brilliant red. Blending these areas together with a little bit of clean water. I got a little bit of runoff here because I'm on an angle. Just got to be careful that doesn't pile up on me too much there. Okay, so now I got a little bit of a of an area where I have a shadow in the middle where the stem is kind of sinking in, the apple kind of dips in. So I have some of the darker red that we are using, which is the crimson. And I mixed a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of violet in there. So I'm going to take some of that and I'm going to use that right over in the shadow area right here, where the apple gets a little bit darker. It's like the top of the apple really. The apple's laying on its side. So this is like a hollowed out area that we are kind of having a little bit of a shadow area on. So again, that was our deeper red, our crimson with burnt umber and a little bit of violet. So I'm going to take that red, kind of blend those two together now. And this is a bit of a process, guys, because you got a lot of small delicate transitions going on, and we want to be able to manage them by painting from light to dark. You can be a lot more deliberate than I'm being right now, and you can kind of just let it you can go a little quicker and be a little bit more deliberate with your strokes. And a lot of people are great at that. This is a little bit of a lesson on how to render, how to use a bunch of layers and try to get something to look a little bit more real. All right, so that's working good. Now I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to lay that into our shadow side. So that was our crimson with burnt umber and violet in it. Now I may have to come back with one more layer of this just to kind of get it to work the way we want, and have the value be dark enough. I could also kind of let that blue from the background, I could do a wash of that blue right into this after this dries, and because you see you have quite a bit of reflected light coming from the fabric back into the apple. So I used a little bit of a flat brush there, like a 1/2 inch flat brush, just to kind of let that dark come over smooth. Throw some of that red back in. Our red's a little stronger here. I can let that come back into that dark. Same thing over here. Over here. And I'm just now taking a clean brush and blending those areas together. I want that edge to be a bit soft. That's where our highlight is. Now my red, my kind of shadow color of the apple ran off into the background a little bit. That's okay. Under here we're going to add another darker shadow, cast shadow from that the apple's casting on the background. So the cast shadow is what makes the apple actually look like it's sitting on something. So I'm going to let that just a nice, this again was ultramarine blue some violet, and some Payne's gray. And one thing that's always true with shadows is that color decreases in shadows. Shadows are less chromatic, or color is less intense in a shadow than it is in the light. So we always want to be mindful of that and make sure that we don't make our shadows too colorful. I'm just going to kind of soften up this edge with a little bit of clean water. Alright guys, so the last little bit I did, I thought I was filming, but I wasn't. I apologize. What I did was I took that mixture for the shadow area, which was violet or crimson and burnt umber, and I laid in another layer of shadow. You see it's starting to get pretty close now. And over here I did the same thing on my other area of shadow. And then I blended that back in with a little bit more of the red, the brilliant red right over here. I also pulled out a couple little spots, just like we did in the swan one, where you put a little dot of water on, you kind of scrub a little, and you can pull some of those little spots out if you like. What I'm doing now is I'm going to kind of lay that stem in. Now I have burnt sienna and a little bit of medium yellow. I'm just going to kind of paint that light layer in first of the stem. See, it's got a little bit of a lighter edge as it comes into the middle. So I'm mixing those colors again. It's ultramarine blue, violet, and some Payne's gray. So I want to make sure I have enough of it before I start. Again, guys, this is a lot of layers here, and again, the you know, you can do this with a more expensive paint and less layers because the pigment's stronger. But that's fine. We're just going to use a couple extra layers here just to kind of get our darks in, but that's okay. So we're going to take it over here on the edge of the apple. I'm going to lay this nice dark carefully up against the edge of the apple. And I'm just going to as I go to the top left corner, I'm going to throw more Payne's gray in. I have a nice wash and under painting of the blues and the violets, so I can afford to throw just that darker dark up there and really get that punchy dark that I was looking for. And I'm just going to end that right here, and then just let that kind of bleed out with a lighter color. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is keep it. I'm just going to use water. We need another color there. I'm just going to let the water. Now I could continue over to the right and do the same thing. Take a little bit of water. Let this just kind of blend out with some water. And I don't care if there's areas of variation. That's fine with me. It doesn't have to be perfect. It does get dark here again on this side, and I'm going to do that. So I'm adding that whole mixture again with the Payne's Gray, the Violet, and the Ultramarine Blue. Because I want to show that shadowy area on the right side, and I also want to make sure that I throw that cast shadow in there and define that a little bit more under the apple, and that cast shadow is kind of traveling from left to right. So I want to make sure I get that in there. That'll be right here. I'll take a little bit of that lighter blue mixture, which was the same mixture, just adding a little bit of white into it. And now I'm just going to let the water blend it all together. So I'm just going to put a couple finishing touches on it, guys. I'm going to what I'm going to do is I'm just going to punch up a little detail on the stem. So I mixed up some burnt umber, some violet, and some, actually I think that's all it is, burnt umber and violet. So yeah, so all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of punch up these little bits of darks that are on the stem. So now when I'm doing this, what I want to really try to do is give myself a drier mix. I don't want a super wet mix here. All right, I just want to create a couple little dark lines. Just a couple little accenting strokes here for detail. I'm going to do a whole bunch more than that. I'm just going to add the back side of the stem, the top of it with a little bit of detail. And I do have a little bit of burnt sienna out, which I think I'll just mix with some medium yellow and just punch up. I'm going to make this. Yeah, when you're doing little bits of detail, guys, you want to make sure you have a drier mix, because otherwise the paint will just run away on you and you can't really get what you're looking to do. So you have to make the paint a little bit thicker. So especially it's a little teeny area. You can't do it with a soupy mix. It just won't work. Just mixing a little bit more of that for the stem so I can get a little bit more of those details in. A little bit of a highlight on this the top edge. And that'll do that for that. And then I'm going to I think I'll just mix up a little tiny bit of orange and yellow, medium yellow. Maybe a little touch of the lemon yellow. I want to get kind of a lighter color for those little dots. I think I'll just put them in opaquely. They might not even show up. I'm going to throw them in before I go and do the other stuff. Just put a couple of them here and there. This will probably show up a little bit more on the darker bits. Have to go crazy with it. We'll just put him. And when you're doing something like this, guys, too, you got to make sure it looks organic. You don't want it to look too methodical and too repetitious. You know, you don't want to, certainly don't want to follow any pattern that the eye will pick up, and then it'll look fake. It's got to kind of look natural. What I had done before, when I didn't realize that the phone wasn't filming, I took just a clean brush and some water, and I scrubbed out little areas like we did with the swan. That worked good too. They're a little softer. I think that'll do that for now. They might not even show up. We'll see when it dries. But what I'm going to do, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw kind of a violet, ultramarine blue violet tint to this back shadow of the apple. And the reason I'm doing that is because there is reflected light off the background into that shadow side of the apple. And I don't want it to be too warm of a shadow. So I'm going to cool it down a little bit with this it's ultramarine blue, violet, and a little bit of the red in there, the the crimson. So I'm just going to wash this over the shadow side, and then I'm going to blend it back in to keep that edge soft. Just going to blend it right back into the rest of the apple with the crimson or the red. So I'm going to take that the crimson, and I'm going to throw that right back into this edge, keeping it soft. And now I'll just take that the bright red, take a little bit of the bright red, and I'll throw that into the edge of the crimson. Make that nice transition. So anytime you're painting something like a sphere or a cylinder or an egg or a cone, something that's got a soft edge, the edge graduates, it gradates from dark to light, especially if you have like one source lighting like this. The shadow gradates into the light. It's not a hard edge, it's a soft edge. So that was one of the tricks on this one, to try to keep that really nice soft edge on the transition, going from dark into light. Here again, I'm just kind of mimicking that pattern that's in the apple. Manipulating that paint just a little bit. I'm going to hit it with a hairdryer, and I think we're done. I'm just going to make one little check, and once it's dry, I'll see if I need a couple little more those little spots, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, guys, I'm just doing one tiny little last highlight. I took a little bit more of an opaque light red orange, and I just kind of dotted in after the fact where, you know, those spots on the apple. Didn't go nuts on it. You don't want to overdo it either. So now I just have a mixture of violet and white, and a very light value of that. I'm going to put that over that little highlight on the top. It's kind of the top and the top right of the apple. I'm going to keep this soft as well, guys. I'm going to just kind of feather these lines in and out a little bit. I'm not going to go nuts with it. I'm just going to do it a little bit. And this is probably going to blend right back in as well. It looks kind of harsh right now, but I'm going to. You see what I'm going to do? I'm going to diffuse it a little bit with just now a clean brush. And I really like that little change of color that magenta brought to the highlight. So I'm going to throw that in there. I think that really kind of puts the whole thing over the top. I like it a lot. Throw a little bit more in there. Then I'm going to take clean water and just kind of diffuse that a little bit, and we'll be good to go. I think that'll do it.